the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war.
A president who explicitly promised no new wars, now doing a new war. We have to talk about the biggest story anywhere in the world right now, which is, of course, the war against Iran. And this has been something people have been speculating about and kind of expecting to see happen for several months now. Both behind the scenes, there's been this kind of will he, won't he, internal struggle of war between, or tug of war between more interventionist Republican types and more kind of America first anti-interventionist Republican types. And so I'm going to give you my take on the situation, though it's unfolding and a lot of details still need to be confirmed. I will, though, give you guys a disclaimer alert that this is not my area of expertise, foreign affairs. And I do acknowledge the complexity, the nuance to a lot of this. And I know some very smart people I respect who come down on either side of these debates. And I don't really pretend to have all the answers personally, but this is a news podcast. And what else am I going to talk about other than what is going on? But if you have a different take on it than me, I understand. I think I can understand why you would feel that way. And hopefully you get where I'm coming from. And before I get into the reasons that I'm deeply concerned and object to what's happening right now, I will say that I'm absolutely glad that the Ayatollah is dead and that this horrific regime may fall. I mean, I have known many Iranian people over the years. I have read and watched even recently with absolute horror and disgust as they kill thousands of their own citizens. It is, or I guess was, though I'm not sure exactly what the current status of the regime is or if it will really ultimately fall. Yeah, it was a scourge, right? Genuinely a repressive force on human freedom and individual rights. And of course, I'm happy to see justice and karma come to this evil man and to the rest of the regime. But I have to say, we have seen, and I've covered politics for almost a decade now. And before that, obviously, I wasn't covering it, but I've read about and studied. We've seen many a horrible regime toppled for something worse to come next. And just because bad guys get taken down doesn't, in the long run, always work out to the benefit of the people. Just look at situations like Libya, for example, where we took out a very bad guy. And then, of course, when the regime collapsed, things ended up much, much worse. So it's always a question of what comes next when you talk about regime change. And it's a question of consistency, as we will get to, because we were repeatedly promised by Trump and as a campaigning no new wars and no more regime change wars. And here we are with a war that is, in fact, very obviously a regime change war, totally unauthorized by Congress as the Constitution demands. So I understand why many of my Iranian American friends, why many Iranian immigrants and expatriates are celebrating. I don't begrudge them that for a second. But that doesn't mean that I'm willing to toss aside concerns about what comes next or about the way in which this was done, which to me is obviously unconstitutional and illegal. So why? Why is it that, to me, Trump's war with Iran is obviously unconstitutional? And to that, we just have to look to the Constitution itself, which very clearly says that the power to declare war is given to Congress, not the president. The president is the commander-in-chief, and he gets to essentially run the military, but he does not get to unilaterally launch the nation into new conflicts without buy-in from the people, without buy-in from the public. And that is what Congress is supposed to reflect, right? It's a diverse body of individuals represented. In the case of the House of Representatives, they're essentially always up for re-election. So getting the congressional buy-in for a war is supposed to ensure that you are not getting into things lightly, that you are not putting a president's personal, like, political agenda or ambitions or people influencing him ahead of what the country actually wants. And it is the right way to do things under our constitutional order. Now, with some past military interventions, they've essentially argued, well, it's not a war. Nobody can argue. Well, actually, some people will try to argue this, that we'll get to later today. but like nobody, it's obviously a war. Even Trump and they are admitting that it's a war. So then it becomes a question of can you just do that? And under our Constitution, the answer is no. So here is law professor Ilya Somin writing for Reason. In an unconstitutional war, Trump's attack on Iran is obviously unconstitutional. The moral and policy issues are a closer call. Last night, the U.S. and Israel initiated a large-scale military attack. This is a couple days ago now. This action is blatantly unconstitutional. Its wisdom and morality are more debatable. Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the exclusive power to declare war. One can debate the extent to which presidents can initiate relatively small-scale military actions, and such debates have raged for decades. But this attack is very obviously large enough to qualify as a war. Thus, it obviously requires congressional authorization, and Trump didn't get any, and indeed did not even try to do so. And you'll see that some people are somehow trying to argue it's not a war, but to me that ship kind of sailed when even President Trump himself admitted that it is in fact a war. Listen to this.
The Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future.
Well, of course, that was the remarks he gave immediately as it was happening. And tragically, 4 American service members have been killed and others have been injured as of a few days later now. And my heart goes out to their families. I am very saddened by their loss. And I think you have to view everything that comes next and every decision that was made in the context of that life lost and in the context of a president who explicitly promised no new wars, now doing a new war, and explicitly over the years promised that he would be different from the kind of regime change, foreign entanglements Republicans that came before him, now seemingly doing something that many of them have wanted for a very long time. Anyway, back to Ilya Somin here, the law professor. That latter is not just a technical legal issue. The requirement of congressional authorization for the initiation of war is to ensure that no one person can take the country to war on his own, and that any major military action have broad public support, which can be essential to ensuring that we have the will and commitment needed to achieve victory against difficult opponents. Now, of course, there is not such buy-in. And as you can see here, polling suggests that most of the public does not support this conflict or, yes, war with Iran. Here is Reuters. Just 1 in 4 Americans supports U.S. strikes on Iran, a Reuters poll finds. Only 1 in 4 Americans approves of the U.S. strikes that killed Iran's leader, while about half, including 1 in 4 Republicans, believe President Donald Trump is too willing to use military force, according to a Reuters poll that concluded on Sunday. Some 27% of respondents said they approved of the strikes, while 43% disapproved and 29% were not sure. About 9 in 10 respondents said they'd heard at least a little about the strikes, which began early on Saturday. So exactly the reason that congressional authorization is mandated by the Constitution for a war like this is to ensure that you don't do it when most of the public doesn't support it, as is the case. And to me, it's pretty flagrantly unconstitutional, the way that Trump has gone about this. And if there was really a need for a war with Iran, absent some imminent invasion or strike that was about to hit the U.S., and so he had to act quickly to defend the U.S. and repel the invasion. That's the only kind of limited circumstance where the president is allowed to take military action without congressional authorization like this. Yeah, absent that, and we now know that's not the case. We'll get to that later. We know that there was not looming incoming missile strikes on America from Iran or anything. Then you have to go to Congress and you have to get authorization to do something like this if you care about the Constitution you swore to uphold. Now, the strongest argument that Trump and his allies have, and I certainly give it credence, is that other presidents have similarly engaged in unconstitutional wars, like Obama in Libya, for example, did not have congressional authorization to go and do what he did. But of course, Republicans scream, many of them, the constitutionalist conservatives who are now cheering on Trump, scream bloody murder about that. Many even wanted to impeach him for violating the Constitution. And now they're cheerleading Trump doing something quite similar. So it is, to me, the epitome of hypocrisy, of double standards, to have cried outrage about that, but then be fine with Trump doing it, or even hugely supportive of Trump doing it. I think both are a serious problem. I think the Constitution is not a choose your own adventure book, right? You don't get to just pick the parts you want to uphold and discard the parts that are not convenient. And then the other problem is that some people are like, well, past presidents have done it, so it's fine. What are we going to do? Tie a arm behind our back because other people and play by rules no one else is? Yes, actually. The same way we would never say that like violating the First Amendment is fine because other presidents have violated it. No, like if you actually care about these things, you still have to care about them and uphold them, those basic standards to your side. And many people seem unwilling to do so. Now, others are trying, and I understand that they're attempting this, but I don't find it very convincing, to make the argument that Trump's actions are justified through something called the War Powers Resolution. And I'll play you a video of somebody, Shabos from PragerU, making that argument. Listen to him.
One of the dumbest arguments you can be making is that President Trump is conducting an unconstitutional, unauthorized, and illegal war against Iran. Check out the 1973 War Powers Act. It clearly allows the president to initiate military action even without a congressional authorization of war. In fact, the last time Congress even declared war was in 1942, but we as the United States have fought dozens of wars since 1942, even without congressional authorizations of war. This includes Korea in 1950, Bay of Pigs in 61, Vietnam in 64, Cambodia in 1970, Lebanon in 82, Grenada in 83, Panama in 89, Iraq in 91, Somalia in 93, Bosnia in 95, Kosovo in 99, Afghanistan in 2001, Libya in 2011, Syria in 2014, Yemen in 2015. In fact, during his presidency, it was Obama who authorized U.S. airstrikes in 7 different countries, even without congressional authorization: Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Pakistan, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. President Trump doesn't require congressional approval to conduct military strikes in Iran because he has what's called Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, which shows that as Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. military, he has authority to use the U.S. military to protect American interests both at home and abroad. You know who used this? President Obama in 2011. He invoked it when he killed Osama bin Laden in 2011 in Pakistan. So the president is able to strike Iran based on the War Powers Resolution Act of 1973, the 2001 Authorization for Use of Military Force, the AMUF, and bizarrely enough, Article 51 of the UN Charter, which shows that we have an inherent right of individual or collective self-defense. So you don't have to agree or like with the president's decision to conduct airstrikes in Iran, but to pretend that it's unconstitutional is simply divorced from reality. Send this to a liberal who needs to hear it.
Well, I am not a liberal by any stretch of the imagination, but apparently I need to hear this. And it's funny, he's like, there's so much wrong with this, I hardly even know where to begin. He's citing the UN, the United Nations, to make a constitutional argument that has literally no bearing on whether something is constitutional. What matters is our Constitution. And it's interesting, he's saying we haven't declared any wars. Then it actually cites authorizations of use of military force that Congress explicitly voted to authorize for things like the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. Congress did vote to authorize those conflicts. And anyway, the main thing here, you hear people cite this all the time, the War Powers Resolution. Now, they claim that it essentially gives the president the right to launch a war unilaterally and then just has to notify Congress and then cease hostilities after a certain point if Congress doesn't validate it. But so one, that isn't what it says, and we'll get to what it says. But actually, if it does designated Congress's congressional war declaring power to the president, that would be unconstitutional. You can't just pass a law giving permission to do your constitutional duty to another branch of government. The president couldn't sign an executive order announcing that now Congress will have the pardon power. Actually, now the Speaker of the House will have it because of this executive order. Like, that would be unconstitutional as a delegation of constitutional powers. And so if the War Powers Resolution said what they claims it says, what they claim it says, that it would be itself unconstitutional and null and void. But here's what it actually says. I'll read you from the text. The constitutional powers of the president as commander-in-chief to introduce United States armed forces into hostilities or into situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by the circumstances are exercised only pursuant to, then it lists 3 conditions. 1, a declaration of war. We don't have that. 2, specific statutory authorization. We don't have that. Or 3, a national emergency created by attack upon the United States, its territories or possessions, or its armed forces. So we also don't have that. Now, you could certainly point to ways in which the Iranian regime has attacked America in different ways or harmed Americans, but what that refers to is an imminent threat, what the founders discussed as repelling an invasion, right? So like you don't have time to go to Congress to get authorization when there's literally troops invading the country, right? So if Iran had actually attacked us, fired missiles at the United States, attacked American soldiers directly, then the president could respond. But to launch a weeks-long war, bombing campaign that you yourself call a war, that you're saying you may well put boots on the ground and send them in, yeah, that's a war, and Congress has to vote to authorize it. So what I can tell you guys conclusively is not what will come next, is not how this will go. I hope that it goes well. I am skeptical, very skeptical, given the history of similar regime change wars in the past. But I hope that it goes well. I hope it's swiftly resolved and a much better outcome is reached. I hope that American troops are safe. Obviously, that is already not the case somewhat. But I can tell you certainly that this is an unconstitutional war waged unilaterally in direct violation of our system of checks and balances and our separations of powers. And if it was truly so necessary for the United States to go to war with Iran, the president should have presented to the public and to Congress the case for why such a drastic, extraordinarily costly, a historical decision was justified, and only upon receiving the country's buy-in ever taken such a step. That is my take on it. But you guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments below.